Again, passing by the papers laying in front of locker 317, I grabbed my mop and went to work on the floors of the cafeteria. Due to its size, the cafeteria took a lot more work than I was used to. It took me about 3 hours just to mop the entire floor down, and that even didn't include the kitchen. Surprisingly, nothing really strange happened during this time. I almost forgot where I was. Everything finally seemed normal. I left my mop and bucket in there and opened the door to the kitchen to see what kind of work needed to be done in there. When I went back to the mop, however, I noticed that there were wet shoe prints leading away from it. At first, I thought these were my own, but then I realized the shoe prints were much bigger than my shoes. I wear a size 10 shoe, but these prints looked like a size 14 or bigger. The wet shoe prints led towards the cafeteria doors. I started to follow them through the doors and noticed they continued down one of the halls. I slowly followed the wet prints, cautiously looking behind me every so often. It felt like something was watching me, like it was peering at me from the ends of the hallway. As I followed the tracks, I started to hear a banging noise coming from where the shoe prints were leading me. It was pretty loud, and it sounded metallic. The sound got louder until I made it to the end of one of the hallways. I looked around the corner to find the door to locker 317 opening and slamming shut over and over again. The wet shoe prints on the ground were leading right up to the locker. I very slowly approached it, still feeling like something was watching me from the darkness. When I was about 15 feet from it, the door stopped moving. The hallway grew dead silent as I stood there, just staring at the locker. I reached over and cautiously opened the door and peered inside. Inside the locker, I found a notebook, but not the kind you write notes with in class. This looked more like a diary. Both covers were pitch black leather, and it looked pretty old. I opened the diary to the first page, and I found more drawings of the familiar, thin, dark figure. As I flipped through the pages, I saw more drawings, this time of what appeared to be a janitor. The janitor looked like he was cleaning and picking up things off the ground, but there was the dark figure in the background staring at him from around the corner. I kept flipping through pages to find more drawings of the janitor doing all sorts of tasks, while the dark figure just spied on them from afar. Eventually, after going through about 20 pages or so, I flipped another page, and it was blank. The whole rest of the book was blank. It was now around the time I had to leave, so I decided to put the book back in the locker. Whoever or whatever is here probably wouldn't want me to take it. After my 4th night on the job, I finally decided to speak with my boss about some of the strange things that have been happening. I remembered what I saw inside that weird diary, those drawings of a janitor and the dark figure. So I called up my boss and I asked him if there was a janitor that cleaned the school last year. He sort of danced around the subject, saying that there was no janitor job available last year. That couldn't be right, I thought to myself. The tools in the closet looked used, and that mop handle had some sort of red marking all over it. And then I told him about the papers, the locker, the thing I saw in the hall. He just thought I was crazy. He asked if I was getting enough sleep. But my boss sounded like he was trying to hide something, and soon after that, he hung up. When I walked through the main entrance of the school on the 5th night, I was scared to say the least. When I passed locker 317 on the way to the janitor's closet, I noticed it was open. Inside was the pitch-black diary I read before. I wanted to take another look at it, so I slowly approached the locker and grabbed the diary. I opened the book and I saw all the same drawings I had last night. However, there were now more. There were new pages towards the back. They showed what appeared to be a mop lying on the floor, while the shadow figure was standing over it. The mop handle was covered in what I can only assume was blood. I wondered if these drawings were of the last janitor that worked here. As these questions went through my head, I heard a noise come from the gym. I closed the book and put it back in the locker. I started making my way to the gym, and when I got there, I slowly opened the door. I turned on the lights, and I didn't see anything that could have made that noise. I walked into the middle of the gym floor, just looking for the source of it, when suddenly there was a loud boom and crash, followed by me falling backwards onto the hardwood floor. My ears were ringing from the crash, and I slowly opened my eyes. Looking up, I saw that it was one of the giant lights from the ceiling of the gym. It fell down and almost crushed me to death. I felt something warm on my arms, and I noticed I was bleeding. The glass on the front of the lights shattered and must have flew out and cut my arms open. I think that whatever the hell is haunting this school just tried to kill me. I ran to the front entrance and tried opening the door, but it was locked shut. I tried my keys, but nothing worked. I kicked the door with all my might, but it wouldn't budge. And then I heard the footsteps coming from the other end of the hallway. I quickly turned on my flashlight, turned around, and I saw the thin, tall figure from the drawings. It was standing there, just looking at me. I screamed, and I ran down another one of the hallways. I found a classroom, ran inside, and I shut the door. The room was pitch black, but I stood there with my back against the door, being completely quiet, hoping whatever it was wouldn't find me. I could hear heavy footsteps approaching, getting closer to where I was, until eventually they were right outside the door. I heard what sounded like a claw slowly being dragged across it. The creature started banging and pounding on the door. I held it shut with all my strength until eventually it stopped. Everything grew silent. No footsteps, no more noises from the door. My heart was still beating a mile a minute, terrified of whatever the hell that thing was. I stood there for a few more minutes, just listening, starting to wonder if it was gone. It was so dark inside the classroom, I turned on my flashlight and looked around. When my light scanned over the blackboard, I saw the numbers 317 written all over it. I began to panic again, and I scanned the rest of the room, but there was nothing. I slowly opened the door and peered through the crack. I couldn't see anything. I knew I needed to get out of this place as quickly as possible. I grabbed one of the chairs from the classroom, and I ran to the front entrance again. As soon as I took off running, I could hear heavy footsteps coming from the hall behind me. I made it to the front door, and I swung the chair as hard as I could into it. The glass door shattered. I could hear footsteps growing louder behind me, and my legs were pretty cut up. But I managed to run to my car, and I took off as fast as I could. When I got home, I was still bleeding, so I got some gauze and covered up the cuts. I couldn't sleep at all that night. I was worried that maybe that crazy thing had followed me home. Needless to say, I quit the job the next day, but I decided to do some research into that school. I found an old news report about a janitor that went missing there last year. The police said that all they found was a bloody mop lying on the floor. No trace of the janitor anywhere. I'm lucky I was able to get out of there with my life. I was able to get the janitor job at my old school back, but let this serve as a warning. Never go wandering a school in the middle of the night. You never know what could be in there.